Welcome, everyone. I am Bill Newman, and this is Group Dentistry Now's DSO Study Club webinar series. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to spend some time with us. And thank you to Michelle Strange for being here. We're going to talk about infection control. And the title of this session is Reduce Errors and
Oh, sorry.
Enhance Safety. Hi, Michelle. How you doing?
I'm great. Sorry. Got
Oh,
the
that's okay. That's all right. We're going to give everybody about a minute or two to file in, and then we'll get things going. And while we're waiting for people to jump in, I'll go over some of the rules of the road for the next hour. This session is being recorded right now, so you'll have access to the recording after this. You can find it probably about an hour after this is finished on our YouTube channel or on groupdentistrynow.com in the webinar archive section. And we will send an email out to everybody that's attended live. And even for people that have registered and weren't able to attend live, they'll be able to watch the recording. If you have any questions, you can feel free to just shout those out. Well, you can't shout them out, but you can put those in the Q&A section or in the chat section. I'll monitor both of those. And then we'll either answer those at the end, or if it's pertinent to what Michelle's talking about, we can just answer them in the middle of the presentation. And we had a good chunk of questions come in ahead of time. So we probably have about a dozen questions. Might not get to all of them, but if we don't, then Michelle or I will get back to you after this presentation.
Yeah.
So I think we have 2 minutes that I think we let just about everybody in. So why don't we start things off, Michelle? If you wouldn't mind, maybe take like 2 or 3 minutes just to give everybody an idea of your background. You're involved in a lot of different things, and some people know you, but maybe there's some that don't.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am Michelle Strange. I am a practicing dental hygienist. Actually, I am taking a break from my day seeing patients to do this with you today. As soon as I'm done, I'm jumping back into patient care. I've been practicing as a hygienist for 20 years now, 25 in the industry. I started as an on-the-job trained dental assistant. And so a lot of the things that I talk about and say to you, I come to you not being the pillar of perfection. I've had to work to do the right thing from a safety perspective and an infection prevention perspective. And now that I own my own practice here in Colorado. So I actually just purchased my own practice. Hygienists can operate independently here in Colorado. I'm 4.5 months, going on 5 months into this. And so everything I talk about, and I swear I try to practice what I preach. I'm doing as an employee for the last 20 years. Now I'm doing as an employer. I'm trying to create all these safety protocols. I thank people like Kerr, who brings me here with you today so I can share those with you. And I hope that I can make everything clinically applicable for you while staying compliant.
That's great. Yeah, thank you, Michelle. And thank you for reminding me. Thank you, Carr, for sponsoring this webinar. Yeah, Michelle, I think if you want to just jump into things,
Yeah.
and then again, we can answer any questions you have. Just put them in the Q&A section or in the chat section, and we'll answer those questions, or Michelle most likely will answer the questions as we go along. And then we've, like I said, a bunch of questions came in when people registered. So we're going to make sure we have a little bit of time at the end to answer those questions that came in earlier. Thanks,
Yeah,
Michelle.
absolutely. So today I just want to share some of the strategies that I have found to make, I think, infection prevention and compliance pretty manageable. Not every day is a good day, but I hope I can make it a little easier for you. But the goal is to reduce errors and really promote safety without adding more stress to you. And I'll be talking about things that I think are practical, real world tips that I've used and seen make a difference in my own practice. And by the end of the session, I do hope to show you that it's really possible to implement infection control measures even on the busiest days that we all experience. And so I'd like to talk about why reducing errors and promoting safety, it really matters because it's more than just following a checklist. It's about recognizing the bigger picture. And research shows that systematic factors like limited resources or outdated policies and just even the layout of your facility can make it harder to stick to infection control practices. And so if some of you are in private practice, or not private, but in as clinicians are out there practicing, or even if you go into the spaces, I kind of want you to think about your workspace for a second. Maybe you've got areas where it's tricky to access, let's say hand washing stations, or where the layout just doesn't really support smooth infection prevention practices, because these are the things that really trip us up, even when we're trying our best. And so today we're going to look at ways to reduce errors by tackling both the human and the system-based barriers to infection control. So as we go through, think about your own practice or the practices that you're going in and where these small changes might make a bigger impact when we're talking about safety. And so if I dig in a little deeper into how systematic factors and human behavior contribute to infection control challenges, one of the biggest issues that I think research highlights is poor communication within the team. And so when there's this breakdown in how information is shared, whether it's about protocols or new procedures or even the product usage, errors are just more likely to happen, which obviously makes sense, right? When we're not communicating, there's going to be errors. And another major issue is just the lack of infection prevention knowledge. So if team members don't have a strong understanding of why certain steps are required or how to properly perform them, we just can't expect consistent results. And this is where leadership plays a crucial role. Strong leadership ensures that really everyone on the team is, equipped with the knowledge they need, and it's going to create an environment where people feel comfortable asking questions and hopefully seeking clarification if they need it. And so when we look at leadership, it's also driving the culture of communication. So if we're not communicating clearly, it really becomes impossible to keep everyone aligned with infection control practices. And this is something I'm literally doing right now. I'm coming up with ways to communicate with my team, because I am working, I have two assistant or two hygienists working under me, and I have a virtual assistant. So I got them everywhere. So, the real responsibility of this, it's of the leadership isn't just to set protocols, but just to ensure that communication and training, they're consistent and they're actually effective across the entire team, no matter where they are working with you. And I'm just like, I'm curious, like, just to throw this out as a question to sit with you is like, has anyone ever like really experienced just poor communication gaps or gaps in knowledge within your situation? I think that's always like thinking back on how that made you feel and how difficult it was is always like an impetus for us to do a better job for team members. And, I do want to talk about something that I'm sure many of you have experienced in the dental industry. It's called the Hawthorne effect. And so it's this idea that when people know they're being watched, they tend to perform those duties better. I mean, that makes sense, though, right? In fact, a study found that when workers were being observed, their productivity increased, even when their working conditions were made worse, which is kind of wild. They got more productive when their situations got worse. But the catch here, I think, is once the observation stopped, things went back to normal. And so we see this in infection control all the time. When an inspection is coming up or when we're being audited, everyone's on their bestest behavior, right? Everything is cleaned and disinfected and organized to perfection. But after, the pressure's off, some of those habits really start to slip. And this is why I think unannounced visits can be really helpful if you're out there going to practices. I think just kind of showing up gives you a clearer picture of what's actually happening day to day in these practices. Um, But I think one of the things here that we have to remember is that we don't want a culture where people only perform well because they're being watched, right? We want infection control to be second nature, something that we just do because it's part of our everyday routine, whether you're being watched or not. And so, in today's little moment that we have together, I want to really focus on how we can create a culture where the right thing is the easy thing to do, and where infection control isn't just an obligation, but something that's truly built into the fabric of how we're working and seeing our patients. And now I would say let's talk about something that we can make, that I think can make or break infection control in dental practices, and that is your training that you have for the team. And I'm not talking just about training like across the board, but training like specific to your practice or specific to offices, or at least multiple offices. If you have somebody that's kind of jumping around, maybe they temp in a few offices that you have. I Every clinic has its own set of workflows, its own equipment, and I think unique challenges. So generic information or infection control information and training, I really don't think is always enough. It's I've seen this happen in practices where the training was just like too broad, and it didn't reflect the day-to-day task that the team was actually performing. I feel like this happens a lot with OSHA training. Like they just go and it's just like this broad sweeping scope of like things you got to do. And then people go back and they're like, well, I don't know how that applies to my day to day. And so it's just like, boop, boop, gone out of their brain, right? And when training doesn't match reality, people end up improvising. And that's when the mistakes, I think, start to happen. So, for example, I was temping as a hygienist through the years before buying this practice, and it makes sure the team to know to walk into a practice and then just be like, so how do I disinfect this operatory? And everybody goes, uh, you don't know how to do that? And I'm like, well, I know the general concept, clean and disinfect. I got that. But like, are you barrier wrapping? Is it a 1 minute contact time? Is it a 3 minute contact time? Is everything getting wiped down? Are there certain items that require very specific stuff? I do guided biofilm therapy. My sweet little baby machine in there she's a persnickety one. I love her. I die for her, but she is persnickety. And she requires a very specific disinfectant. So if somebody comes in and they're using my equipment and they use the wrong thing, they're going to ruin my equipment. So I want to make sure that that training is very specific for the environment, and just assume that we all know how to do it because we've disinfected one op, so we can disinfect them all. It's just not it. And so when we look at like a safety culture, I think that's what we're gonna like lead to here, is like talking about the safety culture. It's not something that just like happens. It's something we have to actively build and maintain. And it's the foundation of everything we do in infection control. And a strong safety culture is, and you can see on the screen here, recognizable, it is measurable, and it is manageable. And it's what helps ensure that everyone in the practice is on the same page when it comes to safety, from the newest team member to the most experienced team member on your team, right? I will say though, safety culture isn't just about having your policies. Like you can write it out but that's not it, right? It's about making sure that every member of the team feels like they're responsible for the infection control practices. I heard somebody say, if infection control is everyone's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. And we're trying to build like a culture where safety isn't just something we think about when there's an audit, but something that's part of our daily routine. So like, I guess the next question I always get on this is, how do we create and actually sustain a safety culture? And I kind of talked about this already, but I do believe that it starts with leadership, and it starts with clear communication, which we see in the research, and it starts with systems that make safety just overall easier to achieve. And one key thing to remember is that a strong safety culture requires like ongoing effort. It's just not a set it and forget it situation. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on what you feel is strong safety culture that you could find in a practice. But I really want you to, I want to drive home that once you start establishing safety culture, it has to be ongoing. It is not set it and forget it. And I do believe that there are two really important concepts to a safety culture. And this came from the OSAP conference in 2022. They talked about psychological safety and a just culture. And this really resonated with me because I think these are two ideas that are critical when it comes to reducing errors in a dental office. First, when we look at psychological safety, it's all about creating an environment where people feel comfortable to actually speak up, whether it's a question, a concern, or even if they made a mistake. Like when team members are afraid of speaking up because they're worried about being judged or blamed or shamed, or people are going to gossip about them, or they're going to have kind of punitive action, or yeah, whatever it is. There's so many reasons behind this. That's really when we start to see small issues that can turn into bigger problems. Then we add in a just culture. So that is saying, focusing on like accountability without that shame and blame. It recognizes that, y'all, mistakes happen. I literally talk about this day in and day out, but I'm in the hustle and bustle of this every day of seeing patients. I still screw it up. I still make mistakes. It's just the nature. We're humans. We have human brains. We're going to error. But the key is learning from those mistakes. And so instead of punishing someone for making an error, I think we can ask, well, okay, that happened. What can I do to improve the system so it doesn't happen again? So every time I make a mistake, you better believe I'm out here writing another SOP or trying to reorganize something, or like, if I screwed this up and I am literally trying to practice what I preach, this is going to happen to somebody else. So how can I make this or prevent this from happening again? And I do think together, this psychological safety and just culture, it creates a work environment where people aren't afraid to speak up and mistakes are seen as opportunities to improve the way we work. And I think that's a huge part, because that has not always been the environment I have worked in as an employee. And I am determined to make it the environment that I now have in my practice. And I do want to expand just a bit more on the idea of like a just culture. So a just culture is not about letting people off the hook or ignoring mistakes. It's about holding people accountable, but in a way that helps them and the entire team grow from this. So when we ask, things like, well, what led to this error? That's better than who made the mistake? Who did this? Was it you again, Michelle? What I want you to think about is like shifting that focus from that blame to how we can make this improvement. This change in the mindset really does encourage team members to start to report mistakes and near misses, because they know the goal is to learn and prevent. And as somebody that is again now a leader, this is my third company. I've had employees all over. I hope my team members, when they talk about me, they go like, she never sweats the small stuff. She's like, okay, this happened. How do we fix it? If it happens more than once or twice, that's when I start getting spicy, because I have now created certain things. I put things into place, and I'm really trying to give them the space to learn and grow and communicate to me. And if that, I might get spicy when that doesn't happen, anymore. But if I start shaming them or blaming them, I can guarantee I'm not going to have a well-oiled machine that is going to be putting patient safety first. I've experienced that as an employee. And so in infection control, I think this shift from shame and blame is very vital. It's because if someone skips a step or makes a mistake and doesn't feel safe reporting it, it can really lead to some pretty egregious things down the line. But when our teams feel supported in addressing mistakes, we can catch those a lot earlier and really make adjustments to our systems and our workflows to prevent this in the future. So I love this upside down triangle. This is called the hierarchy of controls. This is a concept that's widely used in occupational safety, and I think is just as important in dentistry, especially when we're talking about infection control. And the hierarchy starts, well, in the middle. It doesn't start, it's in the middle here. It starts with engineering controls, which are physical changes that we can make to reduce exposure to hazards. I always call this the section of the hierarchy of controls that we're throwing a little money at, if you will. So let's throw some money at the devices and things that will help reduce our exposures. And in our world, that might look like using safety engineered instruments, or high volume evacuation is a engineering control. Our ultrasonic baths that we use for cleaning our instruments, those are engineering controls. And then underneath that, we have our work practice controls. And these are the behaviors and the procedures that we follow to minimize risk. And those work practice controls are the things like, okay, how do we clean our instruments? If we have this ultrasonic bath, we threw some money at the problem, right? You actually might hear my autoclave going off. I threw some money at my autoclave problem when it came to drying instruments. So like if we throw some money at the ultrasonic bath, are we using it properly? Or are we still finding ourselves scrubbing instruments? Are we wearing our PPE that we pay a lot of money for? How are we disinfecting our ops? So it's like those behaviors, which I do think is the hardest part of this whole situation here. But the idea is that these two types of controls, the engineering and work practice controls, they work together to protect both our team and our patients. But I think that we have to remember that it's the human element and it's our behaviors, and that often determines how well these controls work, which I would like to dive into just a little bit more here, because I think this is where this might be my favorite part, talking about work practice controls, but it also is the part that makes me a little batty crazy because it's dealing with people and their behaviors. Because work practice controls are the heart of how we reduce risk in the dental office. But it plays a huge role in whether or not those uh, engineering controls and things like that are actually effective, because the reality is human error is one of our biggest contributors to infection control failures and infection control breaches. So if you think about it, let's say if someone skips a step in the cleaning process of your instrument reprocessing, or they rush through disinfecting, or they don't properly even use their personal protective equipment, we're immediately introducing risk. And we've all been there if you're a practicing clinician on a busy day when things need to move quickly and it's tempting to cut a corner or two. Like I've definitely wanted to do it some days. And that's why work practice controls have to be clear, they have to be easy to follow, and they need to be integrating into our daily routines in a way that makes them almost automatic. And when we make the right behaviors the easiest behavior, we help minimize those human errors and protect our patients and our teams. So it's not just about having protocols, it's about making sure those protocols are followed consistently, even when the pressure is on our busiest days. And I think a huge part of this conversation, and where I like to get into the weeds with it, is with your standard operating procedures, because their role is to create continuity. SOPs are not just a list of instructions, right? We have our instructions for use of our products for that. Your SOPs go more beyond that. They're the backbone of consistency in infection control. And when we follow our SOPs, it means that everyone on the team is performing the same steps in the same way, hopefully every single time. And this kind of continuity is crucial, especially in a busy practice where things can get chaotic, because without clear SOPs, there's too much room for variation, and that's where those errors start to creep in. So SOPs help to eliminate that variability, really ensuring whether it's even it's a busy Monday morning or a slow Friday afternoon, no matter what, that infection control is handled with the same level of care. And I've seen firsthand some well-written, clear SOPs, how they have helped reduce mistakes and keep everyone on the same page. And I've seen, I mean, I've worked in most practices that have literally none. But I think they're so important, and I call them your source of truth. So the source of truth came from, like, I heard this term when I worked for a teledentistry company where we were building software for teledentistry. I taught people how to do that for a few years. And the source of truth was that one SOP. So it did not matter if it was somebody in India working on the software or someone in America. When one clocked out and one clocked in, they came back to the source of truth. They knew exactly what they needed to do. And when team members have a question about how to perform a task, the SOP should be the first place they go for an answer. They remove the guesswork and they provide that clear, consistent guide for how things need to be done. And this is especially important for infection control when even small mistakes can have big consequences. And by ensuring that everyone is following these same protocols, you do just reduce the risk. You just do. And I also would throw in that I think SOPs, especially clear ones, are how we limit contention and bickering in amongst our teams. I'm sure you've all had to deal with this, where it's like, well, she's been touching it with her dirty hands, or they've been doing it like this. And then it becomes like chat, 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 chat. That's not helpful. And we say, okay, y'all, somebody has diverged from this. Let's go back to our source of truth. Let's go back to our document. It says X, Y, and Z. Oh, most of the time I'll tell you, everybody diverged. Nobody was doing it the way the SOP. They made some little change, and now we come back to this SOP and we're like, okay, it's a living document. What is working and what's not working, and how did we diverge and go different routes? So I think it also helps with those moments of like, they're doing it this way and we're all human. It does happen with most of our teams. And I think your SOPs are the way you get past it, in my personal experience. But I think it's more important here is that your SOPs are kind of those, they prevent the oops, I didn't know that. I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I didn't know that was one thing that I didn't know we did water line testing. I didn't know we wiped the room down twice. I didn't, you've heard it all, right? We've all been there when someone misses a step or does something the wrong way. And when we have these clear written instructions in place, you're just creating that continuity. Everybody knows what to do. We're taking the guesswork out. And this is especially important when things get busy, like I mentioned earlier. So I think it's that preventing of the oops. Now, one of the most important roles in a practice, in my very strong opinion, and that's why I actually created my company, Level Up Infection Prevention. It was designed to train that very specific role of the infection control coordinator. The ICC came from the CDC. They've been recommending this since 2003. We are 20 plus years into recommending that we have a champion of infection prevention in our practices. They suggested this role because they wanted them to be responsible for overseeing infection control protocols, for building out those SOPs, and providing that ongoing training for the team. Because I believe that the ICC is the key player here in reducing errors, because they're constantly monitoring compliance and making sure that infection control is always top priority, not something that's only addressed when there's an issue. And when you have that dedicated person in this role, that means that infection prevention becomes an everyday part of your practice's routine, and it helps keep everyone accountable. And so if your practice doesn't already have, or you don't have them assigned in each one of these practices, it's worth considering how this role can really strengthen your infection control efforts, because They're the nerdy they're me. They're the infection control nerd that like loves logs and systems and protocols. And if they're not the sheriff, they're not here to be like tattling on people and waving their finger at everybody, because they're going to be in charge of really taking from what leadership is creating with the safety culture and trickling it down to the other team members. And so a question I always get is like, how do you choose the right person to be the infection control coordinator? Because it's not just about finding someone with some like technical knowledge of infection control. It's someone that actually wants to do this and is a bit of a strong leader. And they do need to have training that will kind of elevate this role a little bit. This person you choose should be someone who's detail oriented, and you're giving them a little extra time to dedicate to this role, so that they can create these SOPs and work through them and then disseminate that information to everybody on the team. I also love talking about legacy errors. I think this is something that plagues many practices. Legacy errors is a term I heard years ago, and I have just really latched onto it because it just clearly defines what happens and what I have done in practices and what many practices or people in practices are doing. These are mistakes that happen because outdated or just overall incorrect information got passed down over time. And so in dentistry, we're riddled, and I do mean riddled, with legacy errors, because as humans, we often just get stuck in old habits. I hear so often, well, that's how we've always done it. No one's died yet. And when I tell you, tell me your bar is in the crust of the earth. If you're like, well, we're going to just keep doing it because no one's dead. I'm like, oh, Lord, help me. No, that's such a dangerous mindset, right? When it comes to infection prevention. But I think the good news here is the infection control coordinator and a well-documented standard operating procedure booklet can help prevent these errors from continuing, because we're going to be reviewing and updating these protocols. And the ICC ensures that the team is following the best practices and not continuing these legacy errors that just get passed down from team member to team member. And I will tell you some of the legacy error. I'm going to go through a few of them in a minute, but like I said, I've had to check my own legacy errors. I'm constantly doing a self audit and be like, actually, why do I do that? When did I start doing that? Is that a thing that's even recommended anymore? So as like we move forward in this presentation, I want to emphasize that everything we do in infection control is about safeguarding our patient's health. And I do look at that as that we're doing this like one procedure at a time. So every step we take, whether it's cleaning instruments, properly disinfecting rooms, or even maintaining your water lines, that we are contributing to keeping our patients safe and really ensuring that best possible care. And I do understand that it gets easy to get caught up in the hustle of the day. But we really should never lose sight of our why. And I really hope that like in the training that you might do from here on out is that really you're explaining that each procedure, each time we make small actions to do a better job, we are genuinely making a big difference. And I do hope that we are like treating every procedure as an opportunity to do the right thing and keep everyone safe, even on the busiest days. And so in this last little bit, I just kind of want to pivot to some common errors that I do see, some of those legacy errors in dental offices. And again, some that I have made myself. And I will highlight some Occur products here since they are hosting me today. But one of the most frequent mistakes is, I think, in our industry is not choosing products that work well with the equipment we have, or work well with the task that we're trying to perform. So, for example, if we're choosing enzymatic cleaner for our ultrasonic bath, but it may not be the best choice for instrument cleanings, That's a problem. I actually had this issue when this was years ago. And I actually don't remember enzymatic cleaner that they were recommending at the time, but everybody got real onto these sharpen free instruments, which were fabulous. But but no one read the instructions for use. Nobody read that it had to have a very specific enzymatic cleaner used. And then all of a sudden, everybody's instruments are rusting. They have rusty instruments. And they're like, what is happening here? And then they go to the IFUs or they start calling the manufacturer and, oh, oopsie daisy, we've been using the wrong enzymatic cleaner. Things like we choose disinfectants with maybe a 3-minute kill time when really we need a 1-minute kill time because our schedule and turning over an operatory, we don't even have that many minutes. I saw somebody do a breakdown of a hour visit for a hygiene, and they gave them 4 minutes for operatory turnover. And I said, okay, what's the kill time on your disinfectant? And it was 3 minutes. I said, so essentially, we just gave this hygienist a 1 minute, one whole minute to gather their instruments, remove barriers, clean, and then the clock starts after the cleaning for disinfecting and 3 minutes. 1 minute. You want to know how many injuries I bet are coming our way if we're just trying to hustle in 1 minute? So making sure that we have disinfectants that we're choosing that actually work for our schedules and our quick operatory turnover. I think that's a big legacy error. I think making sure or not realizing that there are products that are right for our equipment and our dental units actually will guide us to that, or our intraoral cameras, our scanners, our sensors. And if we don't pick those right products, they could void our warranties. I unfortunately learned that recently with a Nomad machine. I realized that I was using the wrong disinfectant on it. So the point here is like the right product not only ensures better infection control, but also makes our jobs easier. So it's important to evaluate the products we use and make sure that they're going to fit into our workflows in a way that actually reduces errors and supports safety. These are just some videos of me using some of these products. I think another legacy error is not knowing how much enzymatic cleaner goes into your ultrasonic. I worked in an office where I was temping, and so they were like, "Could you help us load or do the ultrasonic?" I was like, "Got you. You know what? My patient is late. Sure, I can help you do that." So I go and I'm like, pull it out, and I'm reading the instructions because I want to know how many ounces per gallon in their ultrasonic. They're like, "Oh, we just dumped some in there." And then I was like, okay, okay. Well, if we're just dumping products in there, one, we might be wasting money, quite honestly, for your budgets, you're wasting money. Or if we're not putting enough enzymatic cleaner, you're not getting those instruments clean. You're just working off of hopes and prayers that you get enough bioburden off to go into the sterilizer. So we really want to make sure that our teams know the products, the chemicals they're using, and the ratios. Same goes with their suctions. I had somebody else that wasn't using the dispensing bucket to actually create the aerosol, the air that goes through the vacuums, our suction lines, which is wasting your time and money. Honestly, if you're not using these and you're doing suction maintenance, but without these, it's kind of a waste, in my humble opinion. And if you're using too much enzymatic cleaner, again, you're just wasting money. So making sure that if you're doing these tasks, that we're doing these tasks with products and with chemicals and SOPs that actually make it worth our time and energy. And just building on that, I want to talk about like consistency of products, because one of the most frustrating things I see is when products that we use are constantly changing. Whether it's because, what's on sale, somebody came in, they're like, well, you could buy a case, get a case free, or, something like that. Or just like, okay, you're out of stock of this. We didn't order in time, so we'll get what's ever available, right? I think that this creates a crazy amount of confusion for the team, especially when they're unsure if the new product works with the equipment or if it has the same kill time, especially if we're talking disinfectants. Is it the same 3 minute? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 1 minute? It just creates confusion when you're switching too much. So I think every time a new product is introduced, the team members, they should stop and read the details and make sure it fits with the existing protocols. And I don't got a lot of time for that. So that takes time and energy, and it really can lead to errors, whether it's, like I said, using the wrong amount of disinfectant or just not using the correct kill time. So I would just caution you, whatever's in your formulary, that you really kind of help the team stick with products that are working for their human behaviors and for your equipment. I had an example of this recently. You know, let's say you're given a disinfectant with a 3 minute kill time and you're used to using a 1 minute kill time, or if you let that surface dry after 1 minute because you don't realize there's a 3 minute contact time, you are not disinfecting anything. That is a huge infection control breach. So we want to make sure, again, consistency matters. And just as a FYI, if you are changing between disinfectants, you really should be wiping down your equipment with soap and water between that, because the mixture of the chemicals, if you're going from quaternary ammonias to hydrogen peroxide or whatever, right? You could be breaking down your equipment and it causes stickiness on the equipment that'll drive your clinicians absolutely bonkers crazy. So another reason to be consistent is nobody's got time to stop and wipe all their equipment down on a Monday morning because they came in and now they have a different, disinfectant. So it's so minute, it feels minor, but that is a big deal when we're talking about the longevity of our equipment and people's behaviors. The other biggest error that I see in dental offices is not fully following through on both the cleaning and disinfecting step here. So sometimes I'll see people only do the cleaning step, or they'll just like use one wipe and wipe the whole operatory down and think that they're getting anything disinfected with that. Or they'll just use one wipe in one hand and they're just wiping all the stuff down, and then they're just or cross-contaminating with their other hand that doesn't have a wipe in it. So I would say here you would make sure your teams always have a wipe in each hand and that they are using multiple wipes, because they got to keep the surface wet for the entire contact time. So I would, if you're going in there and working with teams and monitor or just observing them, see how they're disinfecting their ops. Because again, if they're doing anything outside of that, they are not disinfecting the equipment properly. I would also say, this is just another example of like consistency. I opened up a cabinet and there was the Cavi HP and the Cavi 3 minute. And I was like, well, what are y'all doing here? So what they were doing, and I actually do like this idea, is that they were wiping with a wipe for the cleaning step, and then they were spraying to keep the surfaces wet. And I actually end up doing that a lot of times myself because I'm in Colorado. It's so dry here that I have a hard time, especially in the winter, keeping the surfaces wet long enough. So I will wipe, clean first, and then spray, and it saturates it enough for that full contact time. Well, they were doing this because we don't yet, it will come out soon this year, but Cavi HP will have a spray liquid version coming out, but we don't have one right now. So they were mixing these chemicals, and then they were like, everything's yellowing and it was all sticky and crazy. And I was like, let me just help y'all out. You cannot be mixing chemicals like this. So making sure that, again, your ICC has eyes on this and that everybody is clear that we are not mixing chemicals in our operatories. And these are just some videos of spraying. Because if you're not doing a wipe, discard wipe with your wipes in the disinfecting space, you can spray and clean and then disinfect. And that is totally reasonable to do. It's either spray wipe spray or wipe discard wipe, or like I said, I do a little combination of these. But I would just observe your team members and make sure that they're not doing any crazy legacy errors in this space, because I have seen some wild things in the disinfection process here. Another legacy error, and one that I definitely did in an office about 15 years ago, and that was making our own wipes. So taking gauze and 4x4 gauze and putting it in a container and pouring some Cavicide over it. I get pushback on this, and they're like, proof that it's not disinfecting. Give me a paper, give me research. And I always say, like, I actually don't have to. How are you? I'm just on a webinar real fast. Are you gifts? Oh my gosh. So if you, oh, please, thank you. If you don't mind sitting right there, and then I can get back to you on that. Thank
We're
you.
doing it live, right?
I know it's live, right, y'all?
Yep.
So one of the things that I always tell people about this is that I don't have to give papers or anything. Because the FDA clearance says that we can't. If you go to the manufacturer instructions for use and it does not give you directions to actually create your wipes, there you cannot create your wipes. So I just want you guys to make sure that nobody on the team is doing this. You can do like I was doing in the video before this. You could take your gauze, you could spray and wipe things down, but nothing soaking. We're not pre-making our wipes in 2025. And just say, I kind of mentioned this already, but sticking with the products, because if you have to wipe down your surfaces between those, I'm here to tell you, I'm the team member that would not appreciate that. I don't have time taking soap and water to my operatories between choosing my disinfectants or switching my disinfectants. And then last but not least, in this errors that I see is not barrier wrapping. You can see all the barrier wraps that I choose to use. You can see I'm barrier wrapping the docking station, and I'm barrier wrapping my air waters and my suction devices. I do not have enough time in between patients to put my finger in every one of these little docking stations to clean those out properly. I do not have time to make sure I'm getting underneath the air water syringes properly and in the valves. So barrier wraps are so crucial here. Good ones that are high quality, that are not going to rip and tear so easily. I was given trash bags in a practice one time, and I was like, it made it all of 4 seconds of me pulling it off and the thing ripped. And I was like, oh, well, that's not working. So this will actually help reduce the potential for contamination, cross-contamination with our patients, and it's going to reduce how much time a person needs to spend properly cleaning these little nooks and crannies. And I would write that into your SOPs. I would make sure everybody under the team knows what they're barrier wrapping, how to remove them properly, because there is a good way to do it. It's kind of like your PPE. You can doff your PPE and cross-contaminate like crazy. Same thing with your barrier wraps. So these are just some common errors, legacy errors that I think you should think about, especially when you're writing SOPs and training your teams. And as we kind of wrap up here, I wanted to take a moment just to highlight the importance of having systems in place, because systems don't just reduce errors, they make us a stronger team. And when we have these clear, consistent protocols and we can reduce the frustration, it does help prevent the small mistakes and human errors that are inevitably going to happen. But I also recognize that many of us have worked in environments where we feel like we don't have a say in the systems or the product choices. If you're somebody that works for multiple offices and you're creating these protocols for the teams out there, I would highly encourage you to ask them what's working and what's not. Because I think one of the more frustrating things that I've experienced is having somebody give me an SOP that makes absolutely no sense, that is not going to actually apply to my day-to-day environment. And so I encourage you creating these systems, but then give them to somebody on the team and say, hey, take this and Tell me, does it make sense? Does it work for you? Is this how you would work in your practice? Where do you see some pain points or something? Because systems are important, but it's not just leadership saying, you're going to do this. I wrote these out, deal with it. I think this is a little bit more of a group effort when we are making these. And I'd love to get to some of these questions in these last few minutes that we do have together. But if you do end up having any questions, or you're interested in binders and working with me in any way, or training your ICC, Level Up Infection Prevention is where you can find me, levelupip.com. I also am on social media and Instagram. I have almost 11,000 followers there, and it's only infection control. So if you want to be a real nerd, come follow me over there. And Bill, I'd love to talk about these questions, or answer some of these questions for us.
Yeah, excellent. And just again, thank you, Kerr. Thank you, Michelle, first off, for that was great. And thanks to Kerr for sponsoring this. If you happen to want to get a sample, I'm going to drop a link in the email that we send out tomorrow. But I know Kerr's providing some samples. You can go to dso.pub/sample, and you can request a sample. I'll put that link in the email that we send out to everybody that attended. A couple of questions wrapped around, you mentioned poor communication.
Mm-hmm.
So there were two questions related to communication. One was, how do you share your protocol with your team?
So I guess it depends on what's the impetus to the protocol, but like, let's say we're talking about operatory disinfection. I might say, hey folks, team huddle or monthly meeting or something. We're switching over to Cavi HP because this new equipment, the guided biofilm therapy machine, works better with that. And it's also a 1 minute kill time. And it just is going to be, I think, a better product for our overall compliance of disinfection. Here is how we're going to do it. Here's what that means for you. And I would just maybe do it at like a team huddle. If it came from an injury or a mistake or something like that, I would then communicate that, like, this is why we're doing this. I think it should be kind of we started this protocol. It's written into our SOPs. We've corrected some things here, distribute them at a team huddle or a meeting of some sort, and then give them a week's time or something to say, I'd love your feedback on this. Tell me what's working, what's not working. And then just kind of be all ears for pushback or things that I might have to make some change, but there's inevitably some pushback on some things because people just, that's who they are.
Sure. This one's interesting. As a young doctor, how can we effectively influence more experienced colleagues to prioritize infection control? So that's an
Ah,
interesting perspective.
yeah, the veterans are the hard ones to manage sometimes. I remember for literally being a young hygienist and following a dentist around with a cavi wipe because I just could not trust that he was not contaminating everything. I think knowing who you're speaking to is a big one. Are they emotionally driven? Are they financially driven? Are they PR driven, bad press driven? So let's say maybe it's something like water lines. Like, we need to be doing our water lines because kids got sick and it cost the offices lots of money and they had to close down, and they got in the news and they're known as the dirty dental office now. Like, how could I relate to this person to make them understand why this is a thing? Maybe they don't even know, like, hey, did you know that wearing your mask around your chin, it's medical way? Like, I don't know. It's really kind of, how do you relate to that person? And then pick your battles. Like, if they're if it's terribly egregious, like they're not sterilizing things that they need to sterilize, I'm a little bit more pushy in that way. And I will get very bold in some of my statements when it comes to like direct patient safety. If it's like they're wearing their mask wrong, I don't know, I might like pick my battles, get the big stuff out of the way, and then hopefully eventually get to the little things that I could manage. So I guess know who you're talking to and go after the big ones that are going to be more problematic first and foremost.
Great. All right, so let's maybe talk about the source of truth, standard operating procedures for infection control. So do you have uh, some high levels SOPs that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I would say, oh, like let's take maybe dental unit water lines. I think that's the big one that's uh very relevant in today's world. We're getting more guidance in each state. Like Georgia just Monday, literally, it's now a requirement for them to have water line protocols. I would gather your instructions for use, starting with your dental units. What do they say that you need to be doing for water line maintenance? And then from there, I would make sure that like, okay, what is compatible with testing, treating, and shocking? And then like write out, because your instructions for use will give you a lot of guidance. This should be done every quarter. This should be done daily. This should be done yearly, this, whatever it might be. And just start kind of writing your SOPs out that way. I think it's more of like gathering the IFUs, your instructions for use, confirming that everything truly works for you in your practice, and then building your SOP from there. Is that helpful? Does that make sense?
That is very helpful. You talked a lot about enzymatic cleaner. So this is a question that came in before you started to talk about that. Do you feel it is most important to use an enzymatic cleaner in the ultrasonic instead of a general cleaner?
I mean, I think it is, yeah, I do. I think it's a better way to manage the bioburden in on our instruments that are going in there. The one from Kerr, the Empower, can actually be used as a pre-soak, an enzymatic cleaner in your ultrasonic and in your suction lines. So it's like, triple duty there, so I think that's an easy yes to that one.
Okay, good. That gives us time for a couple more. How do you verify that an office's sterilization process is effective and compliant with CDC guidelines?
So I think the easiest thing to do is so they have an app called the CDC Check, I think it's called Dental Check. Hold on, let me see. It is literally an app on your phone and you can download it. It is called Dental Check. And it is the actual step-by-step guidance from the CDC. I do know quite a few friends on state boards that go in and do these audits, and they are using this. That's what they use. I mean, they might add to it with OSHA and different things, but like they're going through and being like, they wear utility gloves, check. They have proper PPE, check. They have receiving and decontaminating, check. Like that is in the app. So you can use that. I think that's a great step.
And what was that called again?
Dental Check.
Dental check. Okay.
If not, you can go to the cdc.gov/oral health, and they have their CDC guidance for the dental setting. And in the back of that, like PDF, is a checklist. That's the same one you'll find in that app.
Excellent. All right, that's great. Here's one. What is the biggest or most common error in infection control that you see or hear about?
Not drying your instruments before they're packaged, or not letting them dry fully in the sterilization cycle. One thing, I was lucky enough to go to Italy in December with the W&H Lexa autoclave. That's what I have, and they sent me over there, and I got to be in my counterparts of infection prevention experts all over the world, so multiple countries. And I looked at the friend that came with me that was another infection control expert, and I was like, oh, wow. I don't think we talk enough about drying our instruments, because in a cycle at 270 at 4 minutes, which is most of our autoclave cycles, you cannot at all sterilize a droplet of water. So that means that droplet of water that's still on that instrument, in the hinge, in the lumen, whatever, is contaminated. And if it evaporates in the dry cycle, then that means that underneath that water droplet never got sterilized. It is a cold spot, never got touched with the steam. So our instruments are not actually sterile if we're not truly drying them before they go in. And then if you are opening that autoclave while it's in the dry cycle, because some autoclaves will let you open, and that's why I got rid of that one. I now have the Alexa for this reason. If you are able to touch those instruments that are wet, the packages that are wet, those pores are still open. That means everything from the environment, your hands, the countertops, whatever is wicking into those instruments, and they are no longer sterile. Those are my two big ones.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all the time we have, and everybody hung in there, so it's
Yeah.
nice to see that we didn't get anybody dropping off because I think
Good.
those are some really, really great questions from the registrants. So, thank you, Michelle Strange. This was really informative, and thank you everybody for taking an hour out of your day.
Yes.
I hope this was beneficial. It was beneficial. I learned a lot from it. The recording will be up on our website. Give me an hour to get it uploaded, but it'll be on groupdentistrynow.com in the webinar section. And then you can also find it on our YouTube channel. And again, thank you to Kerr. If you want to get that sample that I talked about, dso.pub, P-U-B, dso.pub/sample, and we can have that sent out to you. So again, thanks everybody. And thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Thank you to everybody.